Today I'd like to talk about the Book of Ecclesiastes. This is a book that more or less has been somewhat neglected in the Bible. And I've quoted from it several times, usually just certain verses, but the Book of Ecclesiastes has a variety of thoughts in it. You can kind of go from one and then shift gears and go to another completely different thought. But it's believed that Solomon wrote this book. Now, we want to cover the whole book. In Ecclesiastes chapter 1, verse number 12, or verse 1, 1:1, the words of the preacher. They say that the word Ecclesiastes means the preacher. The words of the preacher, the son of David, king of Jerusalem. Vanity of vanities, saith the preacher, vanity of vanities, all is vanity. Now, it's believed that he wrote this at the end of his life. So we have to review a little as to why he would write this, because his life shows and proves the principle of earthly material vanity. Solomon had more than one name. Let's go to 2 Samuel chapter 12. 2 Samuel 12 and verses 24 and 25. And David comforted Bathsheba his wife, and went into her, and lay with her, and she bare a son, and called his name Solomon. And the Lord loved him. And he sent by the hand of Nathan the prophet, and he called his name Jedediah, because of the Lord. The name Solomon means beloved, it means peaceful or peaceable. The name Jedediah means beloved of the Lord. Peaceable and beloved. He had two different names, and possibly other names that are not really clear in the scriptures. Let's go to Psalm 127. Psalm 127. Verse 1, except the Lord build the house, they labor in vain that build it. Now, the title of this psalm in my Bible is called A Song of Degrees for Solomon. Except the Lord build the house, they labor in vain that build it. Except the Lord keep the city, the watchman waketh but in vain. It is vain for you to rise up early, to sit up late, to eat the bread of sorrows, for so he giveth his beloved. That word Jedediah means beloved. For he giveth his beloved sleep, or he gives Solomon peaceful sleep. His beloved son. Now, let's talk about Solomon a little before we go to Ecclesiastes. First of all, what do you think of Solomon? An enigma? Kind of a puzzle? Good and bad? He went from fame to shame. When he first took over the kingdom after David. Now you notice that Solomon's reign, he had no wars. It was a very peaceful reign. Immediately after his reign, after he died, there was a civil war between Jeroboam and Solomon's son Rehoboam. But when Solomon took over, he automatically removed all opposition. Adonijah was killed, and Abiathar was removed from the priesthood. And Abiathar was part of the family of Eli. And it was prophesied that this family would be diminished in Israel. But what are the first things that Solomon did? Let's go to 1 Kings. I want to point this out rather quickly. 1 Kings chapter 2. First Kings chapter 2. The promise. First Kings, I'm in the wrong book. The death of David. The execution of Shimei. That's in chapter 2. And verse 45, and King Solomon shall be blessed, and the throne of David shall be established forever before the Lord. But this is what happens in chapter 3. His first act, and Solomon made affinity with Pharaoh, king of Egypt. Number 2, he took Pharaoh's daughter and brought her into the city of David. Not good. He made affinity with Egypt, number 1. He married outside of the Israelite line. Number 3, verse number 2. Only the people, well, I'll finish reading verse 1. And brought her into the city of David until he had made an end of building his own house, and the house of the Lord, and the wall of Jerusalem round about. Verse 2, only the people sacrificed in high places, because there was no house built unto the name of the Lord until those days. What did he do? He, number 1, made an affinity. He made an agreement with a foreign nation. It always gets you in trouble. Are we in trouble? We start out good under David. Solomon immediately figures, well, I'm going to expand my foreign policy. And then he marries this woman. No doubt she was an Edomite. I'm not saying that. She was an Edomite, but she was not an Israelite. And number 3, he worshiped in the high places. Verse number 3, and Solomon loved the Lord. This is an enigma, oxymoron. And Solomon loved the Lord, walking in the statutes of David his father. Only he sacrificed and burnt incense in high places. Well, he was a compromiser. 1 Kings chapter 6. Now we know he was known as the wisest man in all the world. His reputation went far and wide. But listen at his priorities. 1 Kings 6:37. In the 4th year was the foundation of the house of the Lord laid, in the month Ziph. And in the 11th year, in the month Bul, which is the 8th month, was the house finished throughout all the parts thereof, according to all the fashion of it. So was he 7 years in building it. It took him 7 years to build the temple. Verse 1, chapter 7. But Solomon was building his own house 13 years. And he finished all his house. Now, I don't want to read something into the text that's not there, but does this show his priority? He spent 7 years in building the house of the Lord. He spent 13 years in building his own house. And then we drop down to verse number 8, and this is what it says. And his house, where he dwelt, had another court within the porch, which was of the like work. Solomon made also an house for Pharaoh's daughter, whom he had taken to wife, like unto this porch. So he had to build her a separate dwelling place. Now, it was not a chicken coop, I'm sure. So how did he do this? By raising taxes. We're not going to read all those verses. But he raised taxes on the people. Remember the story of how the men came to him and he took counsel of the young and the old and so forth. And he took the counsel of the young and said, well, just raise the taxes and you can pay for all of this. Well, the temple was dedicated. The glory of God appeared. But God showed his own glory for his own sake, not for Solomon's. But Solomon had a 5-step downfall. In 1 Kings chapter 10, we don't have to read a whole lot to understand these steps. 1 Kings chapter 10, verse 24. And all the earth sought to Solomon to hear his wisdom, which God had put in his heart, and they brought every man his present, vessels of silver, gold, garments, armor, spices, horses, mules, a rate year by year. Solomon gathered together chariots, horsemen, 1,400 chariots, 12,000 horsemen, whom he bestowed in the cities for chariots and with the king at Jerusalem. And the king made silver to be in Jerusalem as stones, and cedars made he to be as sycamore trees that are in the vale for abundance. The multiplying of wealth. Money is a great servant, but it's a terrible master, a vicious master. Step number 2, verse number 28. And Solomon had horses brought out of Egypt and linen yarn. The king's merchants received the linen yarn at a price, and a chariot came up and went out of Egypt for 600 shekels of silver, an horse for 150. For so all the kings of the Hittites, the kings of the Syria, did they bring them out by their means. Accumulation, multiplication of horses. The presence or the pretense of power. In those days, it was power. What are horses representative of today? Military power. When you folks know, I don't have to give a lot of commentary here. You know exactly what this means in applying to our own nation. Number 1, wealth. Number 2, military power. Number 3, this is chapter 11, verse number 1. But King Solomon loved many strange women. And this strange, it doesn't mean that they were weird. It means they were foreign. That's what it means. Foreign women. Together with the daughter of Pharaoh, women of the Moabites, Ammonites, Edomites, Sidonians, Hittites, of the nations concerning which the Lord had said unto the children of Israel, Ye shall not go into them, neither shall they come to you, for surely they will turn away your heart after their gods. And Solomon clave unto these in love. And he had 700 wives, princesses, 300 concubines, and his wives turned away his heart. Multiplication of foreign wives or people. As you go through the Bible, and I listed this one day, it shows that Israel always had an infatuation with foreigners. Now, verse number 4. And it came to pass when Solomon was old that his wives turned away his heart after other gods. Multiplication of gods. And his heart was not perfect with the Lord his God, as was David his father. And number 5, verse 5. And Solomon went after Ashtaroth, the goddess of the Zidonians, after Milcom, the abomination of the Ammonites. Multiplication of wealth, military power, foreign wives, multiplication of, multiculturalism, and a multi-religious society. Idolatry. Started up here, and it went down here. Let's go to Ecclesiastes. I think after reading those verses briefly, we get a glimpse into the mind of this man. I'm not going to read the whole book of Ecclesiastes, but just kind of jump from thought to thought. Written at the end of his life, at the end of his reign, and no doubt Solomon saw that his kingdom was going to be divided. But this is what he said. Chapter 1, verse 4. He came to the conclusion that one generation passes away. Another generation comes. But 4 things remain constant. Number 1, the earth abideth forever. Verse 5, which is point number 2. The sun also rises. The sun goes down and then hastens to his place where he arose. Number 3, the wind goeth towards the south. It turns about unto the north. It whirleth about continually. And the wind returneth again according to his circuits. Or like the trade winds. Generations come and generations go, and the trade winds are still blowing. The earth's sun still rises and sets. The earth is still here. And the 4th one, all the rivers run into the sea, yet the sea is not full. Unto the place from whence the rivers come, thither they return again. You know, every one of us have been to a lot of places in this country, and some overseas. And you think of great men. No doubt we've all been to, say, Mount Vernon, the home of George Washington. And you walk on that ground and you look at this house, but he's not there. The 2nd generation after him's not there. And the 3rd generation is not there. And the 4th generation is not there. The house still stands. The creek is still there. The sun still rises and sets. But he's not there. And great men have built great things, monuments, great buildings, highways, but the men themselves are gone. But while they're living, they become boastful. I'm going to build a Reich that will last 1,000 years. Where's he? He's gone. Same with Stalin or Lenin or any other, we're going to conquer the world. Well, he's gone. But these constants remain. Verse number 9. Man's work is repetitious. The thing that hath been, it is that which shall be. And that which is done is that which shall be done. This is Ecclesiastes chapter 1, verse 9. And there is no new thing under the sun. Is there anything whereof it may be said, see, this is new? It hath been already of old time, which was before us. Man's work is repetitious. If you invent something, most likely someone else has already beat you to it. But we learn by sore travail in life. Verse number 13. And we kind of jumping from thought to thought. Verse 13. And I gave my heart to seek and to search out by wisdom concerning all things that are done under heaven. This sore travail hath God given to the sons of men to be exercised therewith. How do we learn wisdom? By good times or by hard times? By hard times. A ship is never fully tested until it's in rough seas. You're never really tested. I'm never really tested until we have to sail the rough seas. We learn by travail. You know why, this may sound a little crude, and I don't want to pay disrespect to young people, but you know why sometimes young people are so stupid? No travail. Mom and dad has paid all the bills. Mom and dad go to work. They pay the taxes. They pay the insurance. They have to deal with a bad neighbor. They have to do this and do that and contend with fixing the car and the child, 10 years old, they're just happy as a lark. No travail. That's why they're so dumb. They know everything. You know, we all have heard the quote by Mark Twain. You know, when I was 14, he said, I knew everything. I was smarter than my dad. But when I was 30, it's surprised how much that old man has learned. You see, no travail, no wisdom. I keep telling our grandson, it's not all basketball and football. Life is not all basketball. It's a job sometimes. It's your car breaking down. It's fixing your flat tire at midnight somewhere, and the temperature's about 15 degrees. Cheer up, it's coming. Anyway, let's move on. Chapter number 2. I'm going to read several verses here, 1 through 11. I said in mine heart, go to now, I will prove thee with mirth. Therefore enjoy pleasure, and behold, this also is vanity. I said of laughter, it is mad. Of mirth, what doeth it? I sought in mine heart to give myself unto wine, yet acquainting mine heart with wisdom, and to lay hold on folly, till I might see what was that good for the sons of men which they should do under the heaven all the days of their life. I made me great wonders, or great works. I builded houses. I planted vineyards. He had other people to do it. I made me gardens and orchards. I planted trees in them of all kind of fruit. I made me pools of water, to water therewith the wood that bringeth forth trees. I got me servants and maidens, and had servants born in my house. Also I had great possessions of great and small cattle above all that were in Jerusalem before me. I mean, he outstripped them all. I gathered me also silver and gold, and the peculiar treasure of kings and of provinces. I got me men singers and women singers, and the delights of the sons of men as musical instruments, and that of all sorts. So I was great, and increased more than all that were before me in Jerusalem. Also my wisdom remained in me, and whatsoever mine eyes desired, I kept not from them. I withheld not my heart from any joy. For my heart rejoiced in all my labor, and this was my portion of all my labor. Then I looked on all the works that my hands had wrought, on the labor that I had labored to do, and behold, all was vanity and vexation of spirit, and there was no profit under the sun. He had all these accomplishments over his reign. How long did he reign? Was it 40 years? 40 years. And he came down to the end, and I guess he could see this civil war brewing at the end of his reign, and he says, what did I do all this for? What did I build all this for? I had all this. It's going to go smash. Verse 24, chapter 2. Solomon says to enjoy the work of your own hands. This is kind of a more of on the positive level. There is nothing better for a man than that he should eat and drink, and that he should make his soul enjoy good in his labor. This also I saw that it was from the hand of God. Let's go to 3:13. 3:13 says, and also that every man should eat and drink and enjoy the good of all his labor. It is the gift of God. Let's go to 5:18. 5:18 says, behold, that which I have seen, it is good and comely for one to eat and to drink, and to enjoy the good of all his labor, that he taketh under the sun all the days of his life, which God giveth him, for it is his portion. Every man also, to whom God hath given riches and wealth, and hath given him power to eat thereof, and to take his portion, and to rejoice in his labor, this is the gift of God. For he shall not much remember the days of his life, because God answers him in the joy of his heart. What is he saying? Take a vacation. If you want to go fishing, go fishing. If enjoy the fruit of your own labor. Now, we're not going to go to Proverbs, because in the book of Proverbs, he says you can lay up all this treasure. You can just work your 40 hours, work overtime. Well, you've got a bank account like this, and you've got all this investment in property and cars and everything, and you die and you give it to some guy that either your son or somebody else didn't work for it and didn't appreciate it. So he says, enjoy the work of your own labor. Everybody agree to that? You want to go fishing? Buy you a bass boat if you can afford it. And because he says it's the gift of God. But he mentioned the word labor. He did not mention welfare. In other words, if you work for it, you deserve it. If you don't work for it, that's a different story. You don't appreciate it. Well, chapter 3. We've got to move along here. There's a time and a season for everything. Verse 1, to everything there is a season, a time, to every purpose under the heaven. A time to be born, a time to die, a time to plant, a time to pluck up that which is planted, a time to kill, a time to heal, a time to break down, and a time to build up, a time to weep, a time to laugh, a time to mourn, a time to dance, a time to cast away stones, and a time to gather stones together, a time to embrace, and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to get, a time to lose, a time to keep, and a time to cast away, a time to rend, a time to sow, a time to keep silence, and a time to speak, a time to love and a time to hate, a time of war and a time of peace. It's part of the cycle of life. Let's go to chapter 3, verse 18. Both man and beast die alike, as far as the mortality of life is concerned. 3:18. I said in mine heart concerning the estate of the sons of men, that God might manifest them, and that they might see that they themselves are beasts. For that which befalleth the sons of men befalleth beast, even one thing befalleth them. As the one dieth, so dieth the other. Yea, they have all one breath, so that a man hath no preeminence above a beast. For all is vanity, and all go into one place, all are of the dust, and all turn to the dust again. He's talking about the mortality of the body. Let's go to 12:7. He repeats this. Then shall the dust return to the earth as it was, and the spirit shall return unto God who gave it. The spirit goes back to God. We'll come back to that a little later. 5:15. 5:15. And it came forth of his mother's womb, naked shall he return to go as he came, and shall take nothing of his labor, which he may carry away in his hand. And then 8:8. There is no man that hath power of the Spirit to retain the Spirit, neither hath he power in the day of death, and there is no discharge in this war. Neither shall wickedness deliver those that are given to it. Also, 9:4-6. For to him that is joined to all the living there is hope. For a living dog is better than a dead lion. And the living know that they shall die, but the dead know not anything. Neither have they any more a reward, for the memory of them is forgotten. The way I interpret that last phrase is not if a person dies, I don't forget them. Their memory lives on in me. But their memory of a mortal life is gone. That's what I believe. They don't say, oh, back in 1956, my wife and I, we had a big blow up. Or in 1965, I got, this big tax bill. And all the bad things in life. They don't remember that. In other words, Solomon said in 12:7, your spirit, he did not say your soul. Your spirit goes back to God who gave it. Your soul is your mentality, your emotions, and your will. And that is non-existent when you die. You don't remember tax bills, flat tires, problem with family. You don't remember all that. You're dead. But your spirit goes back to God. Well, be careful what you say. Let's go to chapter 5, verse number 1. What did James say about the tongue? Unruly member. And it can set things on fire. Chapter 5, verse 1. Keep thy foot when thou goest to the house of God, and be more ready to hear than to give the sacrifice of fools, for they consider not that they do evil. Be not rash with thy mouth. Good advice for all of us. And let not thine heart be hasty to utter anything before God. For God is in heaven, and thou upon earth. Therefore let thy words be few. For a dream cometh through a multitude of business, and a fool's voice is known by multitude of words. When thou vowest a vow unto God, defer not to pay it, for he hath no pleasure in fools. What is he saying? It sounds like deductive thinking here, that if you make a vow and don't pay it, you're a fool. For he had no pleasure in fools. Pay that which thou vowed. Better is it that thou shouldest not vow than that thou shouldest vow and not pay. Suffer, or allow not thy mouth to cause thy flesh to sin. Neither say thou before the angel that it was an error. Wherefore should God be angry at thy voice and destroy the work of thine hands? For in the multitude of dreams and many words there are also divers vanities, but fear God. I was thinking one day several years ago that your spoken word is the master of you, but you should be the master of the unspoken word. In other words, you can say something, uh-oh, I've got to back that up, or I've got to prove that. And sometimes I wish maybe our president should refrain some of his words. Might save him some trouble. You know, instead of lashing out. My father told me years and years ago when I was just a young man, he said, if you ever get into an argument with somebody, let them argue at you. That way you know what they believe and you know what you believe. But as long as you keep your arguments to yourself, then he doesn't know what you believe. You know both sides. He only knows one, and that's his. Then you can confront him. Because our biggest problem in many, many cases in life is that thing right below our nose. You know what I mean? Okay, be careful what you say. Here's a good one in 8:11. 8:11. The delayed sentence of evil. Because sentence against an evil work is not executed speedily, therefore the heart of the sons of men is fully set in them to do evil. Oh, I can get by with that. I went out and robbed that grocery store or whatever. I didn't get caught. Hey, I can do it again. Do it again. Just because evil is not executed, or the sentence or the consequences is not executed speedily, figure, oh, well, I can get by with it. And that's the way a lot of people live. Well, here's a good one. 9, verse 7. Go thy way, eat thy bread with joy, and drink thy wine with a merry heart, for God now accepteth thy works. Let thy garments be always white, and let thy head lack no ointment. Live joyfully with thy wife, whom thou lovest, all the days of thy life, which he hath given thee under the sun, all the days of thy vanity. For that is thy portion in this life, and in this thy labor, which thou takest under the sun. Whatsoever thy hand findeth to do, do it with all thy might, for there is no work, nor device, nor knowledge, nor wisdom in the grave whither thou goest. He says, live joyfully with thy wife, Mike. Take her out to eat. Take her on a vacation. Be nice to your wife. In other words, have a good marriage. Treat her good. And the wife should do the same. There you go. The wife should do the same. Love your husband. All this arguing, fussing, it leads to no end. It leads to bitterness, sour, criticalness. Not good. Here's a good one, 10:2. I kind of chuckled when I read this one. A wise man's heart is at his right hand, but a fool's heart is at his left. What do we have in this country? Right and left. Is that where they got this from? A wise man's heart is at his right hand. But a fool's heart, he's a left-handed liberal. It's kind of neat. This book is kind of neat. Okay, chapter 11, verse 1. Be generous. Cast thy bread upon the waters, for thou shalt find it after many days. Give a portion to 7, also to 8, for thou knowest not what evil shall be upon the earth. If the clouds be full of rain, they empty themselves upon the earth. And if the tree fall toward the south or towards the north, in the place where the tree falleth, there it shall be. Be generous. You have to be wise in your generosity, of course. This is not a brag, but I've met a lot of people driving that truck across this country. They just seem to kind of gravitate to truck stops and rest areas. And every one of them's grandmother has passed away, and they're going to the funeral. And, I'm wondering how many times has this grandma died? But, what do? you can tell these people are poor. I mean, they're like poor as Job's turkey. And you give them something. But I never gave them anything without a little service. White people, black people, didn't matter. I gave them a sermon. I wasn't mean about it, but I was stern. I got this close to a black man's face one time. He was asking me for $5. I charged him like this. Serious, just as serious as could be. You're not to spend this on alcohol, tobacco, or wild women. Like that. Okay. I gave him the $5. He couldn't get very far on $5 from a rest area in Barstow, California to L.A. But Jesus said, the poor ye shall always have with you. And I've never missed a meal. How many people have missed a meal because there was no food in the house? We've always had something to eat, never had to sleep out under the bridge. You know, and sometimes your gifts will go to waste. Right? They'll go to waste. Because some people will lie to you. But you give out of the generosity of your heart. Be generous. Because when the time comes for you to lay down for the last time, you have that extra 20 in your pocket that you didn't give, what difference does it make? You know. Anyway. Okay. Let's move to chapter 11, verse 9. Verse 9. Rejoice, O man, in thy youth, and let thy heart cheer thee in the days of thy youth, and walk in the ways of thine heart and in the sight of thine eyes. But know thou that for all these things God will bring thee into judgment. Therefore remove sorrow from thy heart, and put away evil from thy flesh, for childhood and youth are vanity. Remember now. You notice there's no break there in thought. Remember now thy Creator in the days of thy youth, while the evil days come not, nor the years draw nigh, when thou shalt say, I have no pleasure in them. When the sun or the light or the moon or the stars be not darkened, nor the clouds return after the rain. From chapter 11, verse 9 through 12, 2 is one thought. Live wisely, walk in the ways of thine heart, pursue your goals in your youth, but remember the Lord in your youth. Remember now thy Creator in the days of thy youth, because the evil days will come. They will come. You know, all of us, for years have told people, young people, don't wait until you're 50 or 60 years old to confess Christ as your Savior. Get your heart right with God now, when you're 15. Now, chapter 12, verse 3 and following is rather interesting. And it's believed that this fits the human body. Verses 3 through 7. And I thought, I've heard this for years, and I thought, well, I'm gonna look up and see what Adam Clark has to say about it, the old Methodist commentator. And he verified it. So as we read this, I'm going to kind of make a comparison to the human body. In the day when the keepers of the house shall tremble. In other words, the arms of the body are the protectors of the body. The keepers of the body get weak and tremble. The strong men bow themselves. The legs grow weak, unable to hold the weight of the body. And the grinders cease because they are few. What are the grinders? The teeth. And those that look out of the windows be darkened. Your eyesight grows weak. And the doors shall be shut in the streets. There's doors to our human body. There's eyes, ears, and mouth shall be shut. When the sound of the grinding is low, you've lost your teeth. Now you chew with your gums, I guess. And he shall rise up at the voice of the bird, and all the daughters of music shall be brought low. In other words, sleep has escaped. Wake up just at nothing, at the sound of a bird. And when they shall be afraid of that which is high, some sort of authority, become fearful of authority, whether it be civil or otherwise. And fear shall be in the way. And the almond tree, what color are almond blossoms? White. When your hair turns white, the almond tree shall flourish, and the grasshopper shall be a burden. It's either speaking of the small things in life or the weight of a grasshopper. At one time when you're strong, it means nothing. And then it says, and desire shall fail. Your appetites and your passions begin to wane. Because man goeth to his long home, and the mourners go about the streets. Or ever the silver cord, which is usually referred to as your spinal column. The spinal column is your silver cord. Be loosed, or the golden bowl be broken. Your head, your memory, or the pitcher, your heart, at the fountain that pumps water. This fountain in your body, your heart pumps blood. Or the wheel broken at the cistern. In other words, your heart fails. Then shall the dust. See, he's referring, the context is somewhat proven by verse number 7 that he's talking about the human body as dust. Then shall the dust return to the earth as it was, and the spirit shall return unto God who gave it. And it was made so real to us in the passing of Sister Eleanor at 97, but even more at the passing of this young lady, Natalie, this week at 40 years of age. What a shock. It was a shock to all of us. That little church over there was absolutely packed to the doors. And verse number 12. This is not the complete thought, but I'm going to just begin in verse 12. And further by these, my son, be acknowledged or admonished, of making many books there is no end, and much study is a weariness of the flesh. True. It really is. Out of all the making of books, go to a library downtown, thousands of books. And you could take all the books on one subject, I'm convinced, whatever it is, astronomy or math or whatever, and somebody else can write another one. There's something else to add. Well, let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Let us all read verses 13, 14 together. Let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God and keep His commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. For God shall bring every work into judgment, with every secret thing, whether it be good or whether it be evil. Solomon, the wisest man that ever lived, but yet he made some egregious sins. Egregious. But he came down to the very end. What's the conclusion of the whole matter? Fear God. Keep His commandments. I made a delivery one of my several trips to Canada. We were way up there somewhere. And backed up to the dock, and an old, he seemed to be quite elderly man, came out there with a strong Slavic accent. He was from Lithuania. And there were two young men there. And they were all three friends. And these two young men, they needed the delivery of this product because they were starting a business. And they had high hopes of making a lot of money. Two bright, young-looking, intelligent, good-looking young men. We're going to make a lot of money. So we all four unloaded this product, and somebody said, let's go to lunch. Well, there's a restaurant over there. Let's all go to lunch together. So we sat down there, and the two young men over here, and this elderly Lithuanian man sitting on my left, and he turned to me and he said, tell them about it. Tell them about it. He said, tell them to get right with God. So that's what I told him. I said, you're bright, you're young, you're intelligent, just came out of college, you're ambitious. You're going to probably make a go of this, and I hope you do. But the old gentleman said, but what about when you get my age? Then you start looking towards your Creator. He might have been Roman Catholic, I'm not sure. But he said, there's more to life, young men, than making money. So I figured, what can I tell these two young men, just to sum it up? I said, my last statement is, you can live without God, but you will die without hope. So just keep that in mind. You can live without God, but you would die without hope. So we had a good meal there, and we parted our way. And Lord, Holy Spirit, you do the rest. So the cycle of life. Hallelujah. Praise the Lord.